Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Did She Just Say Sex? It is great to have you back, and it's good to know that the last episode did not scare you off because, I know it was a lot. So I'm really happy to have you back for another episode. But if you haven't already listened to episode one, go and have a listen because it is going to provide some context for today's episode. And also, if you haven't listened to the trailer, go and listen to the trailer because it's going to give you an insight into what this podcast is actually for. So before we get into it, make sure you're liking, following, subscribing on whatever chosen listening platform that you have. And make sure you're sharing the podcast as well. Like, let's get other people involved in these conversations, hey? So, okay, today we're jumping straight into it because I want to talk about something that I think we all experience as Christians at some part of our walk, which isn't even necessarily just connected to sex and sexual, immorality, and it's shame. So, shame is one of those emotions that can genuinely be so confusing because it makes you feel like you're the issue and like you're just a bad person. And with my journey, experiencing shame it's been an interesting one because shame around sex actually only kicked in a couple years ago. Like I said in the last episode, being young and curious and learning about sex, I wasn't shy or nervous to talk about it at all. Because, like I said in last week's episode, I was learning sex in the theoretical sense. Like I saw it as interesting rather than something I should fear and be ashamed about. And then when I started to experience sex, even then I didn't feel shame because I was in a committed relationship. I felt safe enough to explore. And then again, my sexual liberation era. Shame did not exist because my interest overrode my religious ethics. Shame actually only kicked in when I started to pursue abstinence. So to paint a picture, it's 2024 and I'm freshly born again. And my goal at this point was to just be a gold star Christian. I was focusing on being a literal teacher's pet to God. Yeah, I wasn't doing any of the bad stuff and I was making sure I was doing all of the good stuff. I was reading my Bible every day. I was praying every day. I was very, very locked in. And I was really proud of myself because when my year anniversary for abstinence came up, I was like, wow, I really did that. Like, I ain't had no sex. So it took a lot of discipline and hard work. And I was proud of that hard work. And abstinence actually started to become a part of my identity. Then I got in a situation where I fell and I had sex. And after that situation, that was the first time I actually felt full shame when it came to sex. I remember afterwards just feeling so angry at myself. Like I just felt dumb. It felt like the past year was all just a fluke. It wasn't real. I was a fraud. And that genuinely made me spiral. Because mind you, this was at the height of my faith journey. I was on such a high with God. Like this was the closest I had ever felt to Him. But yet I was still sinning. Like how does that make any sense? Feeling like a fraud took such a toll on me because, like I said, I was really proud of myself for staying away. But then I realized that I wasn't proud of myself. I had pride in myself. And that's what made me feel like everything was wrong. It just felt like everything was a big fat lie. I went through this difficult period of just having displaced faith. I even started to question God because if I had been so locked in, how could I do this? I didn't only feel like I fooled myself, I also felt like I fooled the people around me. I know I didn't have to go around and start announcing, okay, guys, I had sex. I'm sorry. I had sex to everyone. But a part of me just felt fake. And I'm sure people were looking at me at that time as this perfect Christian girl. But yet I was still allowing myself to be bent every which way. Like, hello? So who was I to be an advocate for God when I couldn't even stick to His principles? And even worse, I made a promise to myself that I couldn't even keep. That was not a good feeling at all. But again, I knew what God said about me. I knew He still loved me. I knew I was redeemed and forgiven and graced and all that lovely stuff that people say when you sin. But I still couldn't help but feel like an imposter. And at the end of the day, it felt deeper than just committing a sin. I felt like I'd exposed who I really was. It took me a while to realize that a lot of shame came from my displaced identity. I just had too much pride in my abstinence. My identity wasn't in Christ. My identity was in being abstinent. And I'd argue that I wasn't even going after God. I was just going after a rule book. And I'll admit, at that time, I probably just felt holier than thou because I was abstinent. I had turned to abstinence for proof that I was doing good spiritually, and it became a scoreboard. And mind you, I wasn't even dating at this time. So of course abstinence was easy. Hello, there's no one there. I'm single and I'm not minding anyone. So of course abstinence is easy. Well, easier than it would have been if I was dating and like had someone to contextualize my abstinence to. But I thought I was doing an amazing thing by like not dating, staying abstinent. Like to me, I was doing a good thing. And I knew that I wanted the things of God. Like this is what made it even more difficult. It wasn't like before where I didn't care about the things of God because I cared about sex, like as a theory more. At this time, like I genuinely wanted to do things God's way. I wanted to follow him and I knew I wanted to follow him. And though I was still like struggling with other things at the time, abstinence was like a big thing for me. It was a thing that I was really serious about. You know, a lot of believers, they have that one thing where it's like, no, I don't do that. But there's still other things that they doing. But there's that one thing where it's like, yeah, I don't do that. And for me, it was abstinence. Coming from the relationship I came from and then the casual experiences I had, I just knew that I didn't want to be with anyone else unless I loved them. Like, I was fortunate enough to experience love in the capacity that I had, and I knew that I didn't want to give room to any other romantic experiences unless it was going to be better than what I already experienced. And in my head, the only way to have that was in marriage. So I was treating abstinence like an experience rather than a principle. That's very important to note. In my head, I was treating abstinence like something I was doing rather than like a principle that I was following. And I had personalized abstinence, which we all should, but it was to my own definition rather than seeking God's reasoning and understanding. Because my understanding of abstinence actually had nothing to do with God. It was all centered around me. It was centered around the fact that I just didn't want to be intimate with someone until I was in love. It was centered around the fact that I had been in a long relationship and just didn't want to give myself to anyone unless, I was committed to them. None of those things have anything to do with God. And I actually started to pursue abstinence before I started getting serious with God because it came from knowing that I was in a relationship where I was experiencing sex in this beautiful way and then going to casual experiences and it not being like what it was before. I was like, yeah, no, I don't want to do this. If it's not someone I am in love with, I don't want to do it. From that and reflecting back to that, I was able to see that I wasn't doing it for God. I was doing it for me. And even though that's not wrong, like, of course, you should do things for yourself, but I was relying on me, which means I was going off my own standard and my own understanding. Well, the word literally tells us, lean not on your own understanding. And that's what I was doing. And that's just not what we're called to do as believers. We're called to live to God's standard. So in my shame, the response that I got from God was grace. Like he was very, very gracious with me, but I still felt wrapped in my shame. And this is when I truly learned the difference between conviction and shame. Conviction says, this is what happened. How can you get closer to God through this? But shame says, you're a terrible person and this is who you are. Now, I think it's really important to see the distinction between conviction and shame because conviction is God's, but shame is of the enemy. Notice how the voice of God is centered around him, but the voice of the enemy is centered around me. The person most surprised by my own failure was me, not God. So I would actually argue to say that conviction is very good. If you feel convicted about something, that is amazing. That's actually the place where you're meant to be. We make conviction this thing that like we shouldn't ever feel or we should stay away from. And if you do feel it, you're not a good Christian. It's like we try to stay away from conviction when really conviction is one of God's most gracious responses to our behavior. Imagine doing something that you know you shouldn't do and not feeling anything. I can't imagine feeling that, but doing something that you know you shouldn't do and feeling something, that's God literally tugging at your heartstrings. If you feel convicted about something, that is amazing. That means God is actively seeking for your heart. I remember last episode where I was talking about Romans 12:2. This is the call to action to that. Conviction is the start of the mindset renewal. Conviction is God's attempt at starting the renewal process and allowing you to see your faults, to see where it doesn't align with Him, and then to seek redemption through His grace. The verse also talks about not conforming to the patterns of this world. So again, God is trying to show us that through conviction, we can't live to worldly standards. Like we can't afford to miss out on the renewing He wants to do in us because we're stuck on worldly principles. So back to the title of this episode, how can I love God and still want sex? Wanting sex isn't proof that you don't love God. If there's one thing that you take from this episode and you never listen again, let it be this. I'm going to say this every episode. I said it last episode and I'm going to say it this episode because truly, if you never listen again, if you never want to hear my voice again, hear this. Wanting sex is not proof that you don't love God. Wanting things of the flesh, it can be anything. It doesn't have to just be sex. Wanting to smoke is not proof that you don't love God. Wanting to drink, get drunk is not proof that you don't love God. Like, these aren't things that are evidence to you not loving God. Because, like, desire is not the enemy. An analogy that I love and I will always use, and throughout the duration of this podcast, I'm always going to use this analogy. Desire is like a fire. Fire is not inherently wrong. Take a fire and place it in a candle, or even better, in a fireplace. It's controlled. It's safe. It lights up a room. It warms up a room. It serves its purpose. But take that same fire, don't light a different flame, take the same fire from the fireplace and place it in the middle of the room. It's going to burn down the whole house. Your house will be inflamed. So when we look at desire that way, it shows us that desire is not bad. It's not a bad thing. God created every single emotion, and desire is one of those. It's a feeling that God takes pride in creating. Like I said last episode, God loves sex. He created sex. Sex cannot be bad if he created it, but he created it within certain parameters. And if we look at the fire in the fireplace as a parameter, that's exactly what it's like. God wants it to serve its purpose when it's used in the way that is intended. And the way he intends is marriage. And I can go on all the reasons why you should be abstinent. I can go, trust me, I can go on and on telling you why. But at the end of the day, there's no point in me telling you guys why if you don't understand the basis of the principle. Sex is not wrong. Desire is not wrong. And God wanted to show me that abstinence is not just about staying away from sex, it's also about stewarding it. As Christians, like I said last episode, we are amazing at behavior modification. We are so good at saying, don't do this, don't do that. But that's not stewarding anything. Stewardship comes from an understanding of the why. We are not called to just follow the book blindly. We are not called to just say, okay, God said this, so I'm going to do this. That's not how faith works. We are called to have a childlike faith. And quite literally, like, think of that logically. Think of it literally. What does that mean? Children ask questions. If you tell a child, don't touch the stove, the kid is going to say, why? The kid has no understanding of the fact that the stove gives off heat. It has no understanding that the stove can hurt them. It has no understanding that in getting hurt by the stove, it can burn them. It can give them burns that might not ever even heal, right? But they want to know why. If you just tell a child, don't touch the stove, they're going to touch the stove. They're going to touch the stove. Because why are you telling me not to do something and not explaining why, right? God wants us to approach our faith inquisitively. He wants us to ask questions. He wants us to know the why. He doesn't want us to just follow the what. Because even though the what is enough, God knows that as humans, we are of inquisitive nature. We want to know the why to stuff. So in understanding that, I was able to sit there and say, okay, cool. God doesn't want me to just sit here and be abstinent. He wants me to steward my abstinence. And we're going to talk about stewarding abstinence next week. But, just a little bit of tea for now. And another thing that makes abstinence really interesting in my context was the way I was treating it as behavior modification is because, like I said, I was single. Of course, it's going to be easy to not have sex when there's no one to have sex with. Again, I was modifying my behavior. But what was I meant to do when I got in a relationship? What was I going to do? Because the infrastructure I had built around abstinence was not going to support future versions of myself. It was just supporting my flesh at the time. Because yeah, I can stay away from sex. I can not date. I can be good. But as soon as you put me in the room with a man that I like and I'm attracted to, the panties are coming off. The panties are coming off. And not because I don't want them to, or not because I don't want to not do it because God said don't, but it's because I was not following abstinence or pursuing abstinence in a way that God deemed right. I was doing it based on my own understanding, and we already know what happens when you follow your own understanding, right? So I had to seek out God's truth for abstinence rather than my own, because my own was never going to support future versions of myself. All I was doing was modifying my behavior. I wasn't stewarding it. So I thought I was disqualified because I felt, feeling in my body, feeling desire. I thought, yeah, I'm a write-off. God can't do anything with me. But I've learned that shame is not of God. Catch that. Shame is not of God. Conviction is. And I know as humans, it's really hard to recognize God's corrective hand. And the enemy knows it's very easy to manipulate conviction and turn it into shame. Like, that is his goal, to constantly manipulate God's truth. Because mind you, the enemy cannot create, alter, or change your destiny. He can't do that. And because he knows he can't do that, the best way or the easiest way for him to try is to just get into your mind. So if you're already feeling convicted about something, it's easy for him to come in and try to distract you from God's goal, from God's truth, right? Because like I said, he can't change anything. He can't alter anything. Like physically, he can't. It's not within his nature. He doesn't know your future. Literally, he does not know what's going to happen in your future. Only God does. So the only thing he can do is get in your mind. He can get in your mind. So as soon as God comes in and says, okay, cool, this is conviction. Let's talk about this. Let's figure out what this is and how it can bring you closer to me. The enemy's going to swoop in and say, no, 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 no. You better feel bad about what you did. You're a bad person. You're a horrible person. The enemy's goal is to quite literally get in your mind. Because again, going back to, I could use Romans 12:2 for literally everything. If there were no other verses in the Bible and it was that verse alone, I would always be able to connect everything. Everything back to Romans 12:2. Because again, renewing your mind. Why does God call us to renew our minds? Because he knows that our minds are susceptible to the enemy. That's just how it is. Our minds are susceptible to the enemy because that's the only place in which he can interject God's truth. So when we're called to renew our mind, it's not just about following God. It's about building an infrastructure that allows us to see conviction as something that is God's and shame as something that is not. So if you're already convicted about something, like I said, it's easy for the enemy to come in and try to distract you from God's truth. God's goal is restoration through him. It's literally him saying, okay, cool, this happened. Let's fix this so it aligns with me. And when I came to that realization, I realized that I really had to go back to the drawing board with my faith. I couldn't treat my faith journey as just a tick list. That's just not how it works. If you're approaching your faith like that, then you will be susceptible. You will, because by your understanding alone, it's not something that you can do. This walk with God is hard. It is so hard. And not only is it hard, but you want to go into it relying on yourself, relying on your flesh. Mind you, your flesh is not coming with you to salvation, so it does not care about you. That's just the truth. Your flesh does not care about your salvation because it's not coming with you. So of course, your flesh is going to be susceptible. It's so easy to commit sins of the flesh. And this is something that we don't talk about enough. We're told not to do the sins, but we're not told it's actually hard because the flesh is of this world. And our spirit is not of this world, but our flesh is. So it's a constant fight between spirit and flesh, literally battling it out. So we have to make the conscious decision and choice to seek God in all that we do. And that starts with conviction. Conviction is like step one of aligning yourself with God's purpose. Because it's literally, God is so gracious. Like imagine if you were to go through things and you just felt nothing. I know I've already said this, but we need to go back. We need to go back. Imagine doing something you know you shouldn't do and not feeling anything, not caring. That's your flesh, because your flesh is not coming with you. So we ought to be, it's very important that y'all understand this. You ought to be tapped in with your spirit. You ought to be, because your flesh does not care. I'm going to keep repeating this. Your flesh does not care. You ought to be tapped in with your spirit because that's where you're going to be able to align yourself with God's will. So next week I am going to get more into what God revealed to me about pursuing abstinence, his why, and how to seek it properly. Because one thing I have realized, and this is not a judgment, but there's not many Christians that are abstinent. And I personally don't even think it's a problem of people just wanting to have sex. You just want to touch people. I don't even think it's that. It's because we don't understand. I didn't understand. I thought I was doing a good thing. I thought I was doing a good thing in the way that I was pursuing abstinence, not dating, not minding no man, not worrying about it, thinking, yeah, it is what it is. I thought I was doing a good thing. And let me tell you this now for free. I told myself 2026, I am going to consciously start dating because I'm getting up there, guys. I'm 25. Do you know what I mean? I would like to be married. I would like to have a husband. I would like to be in covenant with someone. And that's not going to happen if I don't date, right? And that's going to be another episode because Christians act like dating is bad. We demonize dating. And mind you, your husband's not going to come to your door. Your wife is not going to come to your door and say, hi, God sent me. That's not how it works. You got to be outside. But that's an episode for another day. But now that I am dating and approaching dating in the way that I am, I've realized, wow, if I was to date with the infrastructure I had built around abstinence before, me too, I would have been bent every single way, by the way. Hello? Hi. I would have been bent. I would have been so bent. Hello? Because I did not understand what it was for. I thought it was for me, but it's not for me. It's for God. So, like I said, next week we're going to get into, how to be abstinent, if that makes any sense. Not that I'm the perfect person to say that or to advise, but next week is going to be like proper doctrine. It's going to be Bible says this, and this is how we do it. So be prepared, get your notepads, get your books, because next Sunday, you better call me pastor. We're going to be preaching, y'all. But like I said, next Sunday, hello, can I slow down? Can I slow down? Next Thursday, we're going to be talking about pursuing abstinence, his why, and how to seek him in that journey. Because like I said, I feel like a lot of Christians aren't abstinent because they just don't understand it. So with that being said, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Did She Just Say Sex? I don't know why I just turned into Rihanna just then. But thanks for listening to another episode. If this conversation resonated with you, then make sure you're following. Guys, please. Hello, I'm trying to reach the people. Make sure you're following, sharing. And if you have any questions, remember there is a link in the description for questions and dilemmas. When you click the link, just make sure you click if it's a question, if it's a dilemma, type in the T. Like I said, it's always anonymous. And these are going to help shape future episodes of the podcast. And yeah. And yeah, that is literally all from me today. So remember, stay blessed, stay safe. Christians have sex questions too. You're not wrong for your questions. Make sure you ask your questions in the anonymous form. And I will see you next week. Same time, same place. Bye.